Tommy Reynolds has his gun out. He's pointing the gun, and all of a sudden, I see this woman.
They say it's on every single station. They're saying that Daddy died.
I don't think his life ended at Holston's that night.
If it wasn't for Sopranos, I don't know if I'd be here,
My first thing, and I'm with these legends, De Niro.
One night I jumped out of a car doing 60 miles an hour because I was addicted.
Salute, Mob 2.
Salute, MobTube. Today, I'm going to tell you the story of Christy Mirak, a kind-hearted, loving woman whose life was cut short in a senseless act of violence. So here we go. Christy Mirak always wanted to be a teacher. It was a job she wanted since she was a child. She had even role-played teacher and student with her brother and sister when they were young, and now she finally had the position she always wanted. After working as a substitute teacher at Rohrerstown Elementary School in Lancaster, PA, she was offered a more full-time position as it was evident that she was perfect for the job. Christy loved her students, and they loved her. She treated her sixth grade class with respect and looked forward to teaching them new things every day. At 25 years old, Christy had everything she wanted and was truly happy with her life. But on December 21st, 1992, tragedy would strike. Christy was excited that day. She had all of her students' Christmas presents wrapped, and she couldn't wait to hand them out when she got to school. So when she didn't arrive at work that morning, everybody was concerned. Christy lived in a Greenfield Estates apartment with a roommate in Lancaster County. She was originally from Shamokin, Pennsylvania, but moved to Lancaster for her teaching job. Christy was an early riser. She got up most days at 6 a.m. to make breakfast and watch the news, and usually her roommate would leave at 7 a.m. and Christy would leave at around 7:45. When Christy didn't arrive at work that morning, the principal of the school, Harry Goodman, was worried. He called her 5 times and there was no answer on any of the calls, so he called Christy's mother to ask if she had heard from her. Her mother hadn't heard from her either, so Harry decided to drive to Christy's apartment to see if she was there. Some people think it was a little strange how concerned he was about Christy, but I guess he had his reasons. When Harry arrived at the apartment, Christy's car was there. The door to the apartment was open, and he immediately observed that there had been some sort of disturbance at the property. There were no signs of forced entry, but the place was in disarray inside, and it looked like a struggle had taken place. The gifts that Christy had wrapped were scattered all over the living room, and Harry found Christy lying on the living room floor. Harry then ran to a neighboring apartment complex to seek help, and he called 911. Christy had been savagely beaten. It was a brutal and horrific attack. When police arrived, they found Christy on the living room floor and confirmed that she was deceased. She was wearing her coat and gloves, but her underwear had been removed and her top pushed up. She had been raped. Police saw a wooden cutting board near her body, and they believed that's what was used to savagely beat her. They found scuff marks on the door and in the hallway and a footprint at the top of the door. Investigators theorized that during the struggle, Christy may have been picked up off the floor, and that is when she kicked the door, leaving a footprint. Evidence collection began with investigators taking a swatch from the carpet Christy had been laying on, in addition to other carpet swatches and the bloody cutting board. Droplets of blood found on the coffee table that Christy was lying next to were also processed. Although Christy was found lying in the living room, investigators don't believe that the attack took place there. All the evidence pointed to a blitz-style attack right inside the front door. A DNA profile was obtained from semen found inside Christy's home. DNA was found on her body and in blood drops on the carpet inside her apartment. As police were interviewing witnesses, 2 neighbors who had been out walking told investigators that they heard a high-pitched scream coming from Christy's apartment between 7:10 a.m. and 7:20 a.m. The autopsy revealed there were injuries to her neck, back, face, and chest, and her jaw was broken. Police believe that Christy may have used the cutting board in an attempt to protect herself, but the perpetrator overpowered her and used it against her. After she was raped and brutally beaten, Christy had been strangled to death with her own sweater. Christy's roommate, Mary Lasko, left the apartment just 15 minutes before the attack. Investigators immediately set out to determine if Christy Mirak knew her attacker. Was this a lover's quarrel gone wrong or a random attack? They began to develop a victimology report to find out everything from where Christy did her grocery shopping to who she hung out with. It turns out Christy had been involved in a secret relationship with a man 20 years her senior. The man was married, but they had been seeing each other for several years. Christy's family and coworkers were not aware of the relationship, but her close friends were. The day after her murder, the man had shown up at her school with flowers, unaware that Christy had been murdered. As soon as he found out, he went to the police station, gave up his DNA, and granted them a full interview. Investigators continued conducting interviews with people who knew Christy. In just the first few days, over 26 people were interviewed. Neighbors reported to investigators that they had seen a white, muscular man that morning driving a white Dodge or Toyota sedan. He was seen parking his car across from Christy's apartment and walking towards the front door. Police were able to track down a 31-year-old male who fit the description, but he was cleared after collecting hair and DNA that didn't match. One of the people questioned was her principal, Harry Goodman, since he is the one who discovered her body. This is why I always say, if you ever find a body, don't do anything. Just keep it moving. Initially, Goodman thought he was being asked down to the police station to answer questions about Christy and any issues he may have known of. But as soon as he arrived, he was immediately fingerprinted. Investigators thought they were on the right track when they noted that Goodman had begun to be uncooperative and refused to give a DNA sample. But eventually, he was cleared. Over 60 suspects were swabbed during the investigation, but none of them showed up in the CODIS database. This meant that their suspect hadn't committed another crime since murdering Christy or had not been caught yet for any type of sexual offense. Christy's case eventually went cold due to lack of any new leads or evidence until 2015 when Lancaster County District Attorney Craig Stedman reopened the case in an effort to re-examine the DNA based on further advances in DNA testing. Stedman felt it was time to get some fresh eyes on the case, and that fresh look led to C.C. Moore, a genealogist who had solved such cases as naming the Golden State Killer with new genealogical technology. Along with Parabon Nanolabs, she uploaded the DNA that was found on Christy and inside her apartment to a database called GEDmatch. GEDmatch is a website that connects family members via DNA. Family members who want to research their family tree voluntarily upload their DNA in the database. Cece found several distant family members connected to the DNA found at Christy's apartment and began to build out the family tree. Next, she narrowed her search down to a target family in Lancaster who were of Northern European descent with some Puerto Rican heritage. She looked up newspaper articles from the Lancaster area to see if there was any mention of the family members from the target family. CC kept searching through magazines and newspapers and eventually found an online magazine that had an interview with the man. The man said that he was half Puerto Rican, and CC believed she had found Christy's killer. But while the research and work led to a man being found, police needed to test his DNA to ensure with all certainty that he was a match. Police eventually followed the man to an elementary school where he was performing a DJ gig. While there, they observed him throw a water bottle and a piece of gum in the trash. They collected the items and obtained his DNA from them. It was a match. The man was 49-year-old Raymond Rowe. He was arrested in 2018. Raymond Rowe, also known as DJ Freeze, was a well-known wedding and venue DJ who was something of a local celebrity. He also worked in New York and Philadelphia, but his name was particularly well known around central Pennsylvania and especially in Lancaster County. Rowe claimed he had DJ'd events for the likes of Paris Hilton, Sting, and the Eagles. Now, this is probably a good time to tell you that I knew DJ Freeze. I was also in the DJ business, and I met him in the late 90s at a store he owned in Lancaster City called the 12 Spot. At the time, I was living only about 25 minutes away in York City, and I actually live much closer to where those events took place now. My honest opinion of him was, and still is, that he's a complete jerk-off. He always looked down on other DJs, he treated his customers like shit, and he was as smug and arrogant as they come. He did at one point have a turntable of mine fixed for me, but even that turned into a big hassle. Now, I'm certainly not going to claim to have ever expected something like this from him, but I can't say I was totally shocked either. He always struck me as an overly aggressive control freak of a person. So anyway, back to the story. Rowe and his younger brother had been raised by a single mother. At age 14, Raymond Rowe went to live with a close neighbor when his mother asked them to take him in. Rowe was difficult to manage as a teenager, and it is said that Rowe saw himself as God's gift to women at a young age. See, like I said, a jerk-off. Rowe had married 4 times and had at least 1 child. At the time of the murder, he had been engaged and would eventually go on to marry his fiancée, Monica. They divorced in 1998. Now, after the arrest, Rowe is transported to Lancaster City Police Department and taken into an interrogation room. Rowe was read his rights, but right away denied that he had anything to do with Christy's murder. According to investigators, Rowe tried to control the interview through manipulation, but after police made it clear that they had a match to his DNA, the interview ends and he is arraigned in front of a judge. He pleads not guilty to first-degree murder, 3 counts of rape, 2 counts of involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, and 1 count of burglary. But then, in January 2019, in a bid to avoid the death penalty, Raymond Rowe ends up taking a plea deal. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 60 to 120 years. He has never talked about why he raped and killed Christy Mierak, but after sentencing, he did apologize to the Mierak family, stating, "I'm sorry, I can't even imagine what you're going through. I apologize." Oh, and remember the white Dodge or Toyota neighbors reported seeing? Rowe drove a white 1988 Toyota Celica at the time of the murder. Now, you may think the story is over, but not yet. Raymond Rowe now has a new attorney and has filed paperwork alleging that he is innocent. He is asking for new DNA testing to be conducted on evidence that was not previously tested. 3 motions have been filed on his behalf, 1 for post-conviction relief, a motion for new forensic DNA testing, and a motion for discovery. Rowe now claims that he had a secret relationship with Christy Mierak and that he had met her at the Chameleon Club in Lancaster City. He claims they had consensual sex on the morning she was murdered, and he says that she was alive when he left and someone else had entered and killed her. He also claims that he felt he had no choice but to plead guilty after the state had filed a notice that they were going to seek the death penalty. He says he was forced by his defense attorneys to take the plea. Rowe is seeking to have several items tested or retested for DNA. These items include the cutting board and a toaster that had been on top of the cutting board, Christy's pants, her sweater, and the t-shirt that she had on under the sweater. In addition, the door and doorknobs and a re-examination of all the vaginal swabs taken during her autopsy. Rowe claims that the DNA will not be found in the new items he has requested to be tested. They will show another man's DNA, and this will exonerate him. Rowe's attorney also argued that there are some newly discovered facts around the case, one being that Christy had a stalker and she was being watched. There is no evidence of this. Raymond Rowe is now serving his sentence at Waymart State Correctional Institution in Waymart, Pennsylvania, and hopefully he will remain there for life. Rohrerstown Elementary School no longer exists today. It was torn down and a new school was built in its place, but Christy Mierak is not forgotten. There is a sculpture dedicated to Christy in the new garden, and a picture of her hangs in the building in remembrance. This has been the story of Christy Mierak. I hope you've all enjoyed this video. Do me a favor and hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. Don't forget, I love you all, and until next time, salute.